The Sodom and Gomorrah ruins were found in the 1990s by Ron Wyatt. The remains show how they were destroyed and what life was like there before the fire and brimstone fell. In this episode, we'll also look at Scripture to see how the biblical record helps us interpret those archaeological findings around the Dead Sea. The sites on the Israeli side of the Dead Sea are ancient ruins unlike any other in the world. They're comprised entirely of ash. Ash in the shape of ancient buildings, pyramids, temples, streets, city walls, and sphinx. And embedded within these structures are millions of balls of sulfur. Josephus, the ancient historian, had this to say in his Wars of the Jews. Now this country is then so sadly burnt up that nobody cares to come at it. It was of old a most happy land, both for the fruits it bore and the riches of its cities, although it be now all burnt up. It is related how, for the impiety of its inhabitants, it was burnt by lightning, in consequence of which there are still the remainders of that divine fire, and the traces or shadows of the 5 cities are still to be seen. So, based on Josephus, the ruins of the cities were visible at the beginning of the 2nd century, almost 2,000 years after the destruction of the city. The ruins in Israel are also more importantly consistent, chemically and physically, with the biblical record. By turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. So the Bible tells us to expect the ruins to be ashes, just like we find on the western side of the Dead Sea. From the air, these sites and their ashen ruins appear a different color than the rock and the sand surrounding the countryside, allowing those who are interested to clearly delineate the extent of the towns and their ashen buildings. Of course, we got to remember that the full extent of wooden buildings at that time that encompassed the towns might have extended quite a bit further into the plain of the Jordan. The ashes are the remains of the limestone buildings only. That is because chemically, the ash deposits, and that's all that's left of the previous buildings, have been tested in laboratories and are calcium sulfate, exactly the material you'd expect to find when buildings made of limestone or calcium carbonate is exposed to sulfur in the presence of extreme heat. The ancient name for sulfur was brimstone, and we are told in Genesis, the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities, and all the valley, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. So the 2 ingredients necessary for the formation of these type of ruins was present: sulfur and extreme heat. But how extreme was the heat? All over the region, on most of the ruins, we see a bizarre wavy pattern to the ash. This is the result of thermal ionization, where atoms repel each other and cause this swirling pattern. It's estimated the temperature of the fire of the brimstone was 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit in order to cause this pattern, or about the temperature of the surface of the sun. Now the ashen remains appear to be man-made, shaped like buildings with right angles, arches, doorways, and other features that just can't be naturally occurring. And they are made out of the exact material we'd expect: calcium sulfate, and embedded with millions of sulfur balls, so pure in form that they are found nowhere else on Earth. So this is exactly what we'd expect from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But if this is the first time you're hearing about these ruins, one has to question why. Why, if these remains have been known since the 1990s, why are you just hearing about them now? Why haven't movies and documentaries been all over TV about a find like this that proves a Bible story? Why are the alternative sites for Sodom and Gomorrah, which don't match the biblical record, getting all the TV time and the genuine one isn't? The answer should be obvious. The Apostle Peter told us these runes have been left as an example for what is going to happen to the ungodly. In Malachi we also read, "And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet, in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts." The cities of the wicked will be ashes on the day of the Lord, just like Sodom and Gomorrah are now. And our ungodly culture doesn't want proof of a Bible story being true, and certainly doesn't want an example like that of what's going to happen to them, possibly personally. However, these runes are incredibly important to use as examples to the unrighteous world. The Bible has told us to use them that way. We've already saw what Peter had to say about this, and Jude also makes a similar comment. Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as those judged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. How can we witness using these runes? Well, one of the best ways is to share this video on social media to reach as many as possible with these stunning videos and stunning scriptures.